What is going on, YouTube? It is your boy, Faithful to God. And I am joined again by my brother, Willie, right here. Say what's up to the audience, Willie.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How's it going?
Yep, yep, man. Listen, it's about to go good because you and I are going to have hopefully some conversations with some Hebrew Israelites today. And Lord willing, hopefully pull some people up out of this foolishness. But with that being said, man, I'm gonna establish the rules. So y'all already know how this goes. If you are Hebrew Israelite, this is the rules of the game. I'm gonna explain to you how it goes. So right now, I am posting the join link in the chat, the live chat. Here goes the join link for you Hebrew Israelites that are gonna watch this. This is the join link. This is how you have access to this room. The rules are as follows. If you identify as a Hebrew Israelite, and you believe it is of uttermost importance that people believe that the people you think are Israelites, before we get to any other discussion, if you come in here, you are under obligation to demonstrate your claim of being an Israelite. You have to prove that you are who you say you are. You know how they say prove all things? First Thessalonians 5:21, you got to put that one into practice. So before we get to anything else, before we get into a conversation about the law, before we get into a conversation about who salvation is for, before we get into a conversation about the Trinity, before we get into a conversation about what Christians believe, you are under obligation to demonstrate your claim of being an Israelite first. And we're going to exhaust that claim. It's not going to be fast. It's going to take us however long it takes us. And you'd better be ready to go into everything because I'm definitely ready to go into everything you guys try to bring out, whether it be the Bible, whether it be extra biblical sources, whether it be paintings, pictures, whatever you want to do, we're going to address it. And I promise you, the audience is going to see that you guys don't have answers to the counterpoints to your claims because a lot of you like to just present your claims, act like nobody actually addressed them, and then pretend that Christians don't have answers. Well, you're going to find out today that Christians do have answers for your poorly thought out objections. So if you're a Hebrew Israelite and you watch this and you want to join, before we get to anything, you are under obligation to demonstrate your claim of being an Israelite. All right. So with that being said, Willie, while we wait for our Hebrew Israelite friends to come up in here, if they even come up in here, because I get the feeling we've done now, man. I'm gonna tell you something, brother. I'm gonna count it right now. I'm gonna do it in real time. I can't tell you how many of these live streams I've done. I've gotten maybe one, two, maybe three dudes out of, and I'm gonna tell you exactly how many they are. All right. I'm literally looking at the live stream. So besides this one, let's see, that's one, two, let's see, that's one, two, three, four, five, six live streams. In those six live streams, maybe three people all together. Now, you got to tell me something. It feels like there's a general fear from these guys to come into live streams like this, where they're going to get actually pressed and where they're under obligation to prove that they're an Israelite. You know, Willie, being that you were in the ICGJC, the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, which is the original One West school. I'm not saying all Hebrew Israelites are One Westers for the record, but you know, the camp Hebrew Israelites tend to be the most bold in their claims, the most uh full of bravado. They act like nobody can come against them. Um, why do you think, at least from the camp perspective, why these guys are unwilling to come into this live stream? I know you and I were talking about it off air, but let's talk about what we were talking about off air, on air. Why do you think these guys are so unwilling to come into this live stream from the campsite?
Well, basically, if the only logical answer is because they're afraid of getting um, exposed, them and that doctrine exposed by somebody that's a legit contender by somebody that can legitimately um, counter their doctrinal claims because they've been for so long, for years, actually decades. And I know this because of how long I've been in this. The doctrine of one West Hebrew Israelism before and now has gone largely unchallenged because the majority of Christians didn't really know how to properly counter the claims and the tenets of one West Hebrew Israelite doctrine. But that's changed within the past couple years, maybe within the past decades, with the rise of the Christian apologists that you've seen on YouTube and social media that have really been studying the doctrines of these groups, and especially considering, some people like both of us have actually been involved with this doctrine. Me being in a camp, you having not been in one, but nevertheless, we're still familiar with what they teach. But if I had to answer that question, the only logical explanation for why they, really don't want to come into a setting like this is because deep down inside, I think they're really afraid of getting exposed, and it really shows how the foundation of what they believe in is built on sand.
Oh yeah, I would agree, man. I definitely agree with that because if these guys are so bold and so adamant about their beliefs, if I sincerely believed what these guys, meaning if I were still in the mindset and if I believe what these guys believe, fam, like I would jump headfirst into conversations with Christians back when I was deceived. So why are these guys not jumping headfirst into the conversations? I've had a level of boldness. I was an idiot though. I was dumb. And them Christians that I talked to, they beat me up. But you know what? That getting beat up is what eventually caused me to see that this doctrine doesn't have any legs to stand on. That's what I want them to see. I want them to see this doctrine doesn't have any legs to stand on. I'm not doing that because I want to take away their belief in the Bible. It's the other way around. I believe in the Bible. I believe wholeheartedly in the Bible. I want them to believe in the Bible correctly. I want them to believe in the Bible the way it was intended to be understood, not the way these Johnny come latelys misunderstand it. So this is why I want these jokers to understand. Like, if you're gonna say people need to believe that you're an Israelite or salvation is only for Israel if you're a camp Hebrew Israelite, then you need to stand on business. You need to come up in here and prove your claim. You can't just expect people to take your doctrines on face value just because you said so. Nah, man. Y'all know the routine. First Thessalonians 5:21, right? Y'all like to quote that a lot, whether camp or non-camp. Prove all things. Well, this is your chance to prove your claims. And who better to prove it against than folks who were in the doctrine, folks who know your breakdowns. So come up in here. Show us that you're not afraid. Show us that you're willing to prove your assumptions. You know, what's going on to the brother JD Martin? He says, I think some of them know, GD, pardon me, GD Martin. I think some of them know that their claims are false, especially the leadership. Yeah, man. I tell you what, uh, brother Willie, when you were in the doctrine, there were points when you questioned it, right? There were points when you were questioning the validity of some of the things that the ICGJC taught you, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Especially within that last year of me being in there, I definitely started questioning a lot of deeply held beliefs at that. Things that I would defend to the T. If somebody tried to came up against it, I definitely started questioning those beliefs that I was taught and held so dear for so long, especially deconstructing, starting from the what they call the milk scriptures with the slavery breakdown, Deuteronomy 28:68, all of the color scriptures. Or what they that's what they call them, color scriptures, but they're not really talking about skin color, like Jeremiah 14:2 and Song of Solomon 1:5, and going through the 12 tribes breakdown in Genesis 49 and Deuteronomy 33, and finding out for myself, especially when reading modern English translations and comparing the scriptures to the Hebrew text and finding out that these things don't even hold up to what was originally said.
Right.
I definitely started questioning those teachings, in ICGJC, um, especially as my time was winding down there.
You know the interesting thing about when you're in that doctrine and you finally find Christians that are smart and savvy enough to deal with the claims. So you have to understand the people, for example, that I was dealing with. This is before the advent, the explosion of Christian apologists directly dealing with Hebrew Israelites. So this is even before the James White debate with Rakah and all that stuff. This is like a few years before that. The Christians that I was dealing with were hitting me with just basic fundamental apologetics, right? What does that look like? Going into the Greek and the Hebrew, going into the context. Just simple things like that. Like what they would do with other groups, whether it be Jehovah Witnesses, Mormons, Muslims, whoever, right? All I was doing was utilizing the same poor hermeneutic that those groups utilize, but just with my ideology in tow. Rather than it being, let's say, the Jehovah Witness doctrine or the Mormon doctrine, I was just presenting the the bugged out doctrine that these guys present. And Christians were correcting me rather easily. Why? Because all you have to do to defeat this doctrine is have a good grasp of context, a good grasp of the original language, or at least a serviceable, a decent understanding. Because your average Hebrew Israelite, I won't say this about all, but your average Hebrew Israelite doesn't know Hebrew or Greek. They don't. They're reliant on external resources to try to get their understanding, and even there, they're misusing it, right? Willie. So, do you mind if we give a story, an example of this, Willie? Because I think this really, you more than anybody know this. So shout out to our friend Abu, our good friend Abu, man. Back in like the mid 2000s, I think you encountered him because the ICGJC used to have a forum, right? They used to have the was it the Holy Conception Unit website? Or I'm trying to remember which specific website that had like a forum that you were a part of.
Yeah, it was the Holy Conception Unit .org that had a forum where people could go on there and ask questions.
Right. So so you and I we're talking about this for the first time, or maybe we've talked about this before. I think I don't recall, but at least on air, I think this might be the first time. If I'm wrong, people can correct me on it. Willie, do you remember though? But we've talked about this off air, and I've talked about this with Abu. Here's something you don't know, Willie. Abu and I, because Abu never shared it disparagingly, just so you know. But Abu shared with me the encounter that he had with you in particular. Like that encounter always stood out to him because he felt that he saw the sincerity in you wanting to defend your doctrinal viewpoint at the time, even though you were wrong. That he had a great deal of respect that at least you were willing to step up to the plate to try to defend the belief. But what he remembered was when he went into the phrase in Deuteronomy 28:68 that's in the reflexive Wahit Makartim, that's mispronounced by the camps as Wahathamakartham, right? Now, tell people the story because I think it'd be great if you went into an example of when you were actually in a camp. In fact, you were in the original One West camp, the ICGJC. That's the original One West. When you had that encounter with Abu, who's a very intelligent Christian apologist who knows Hebrew, tell people that encounter. Walk them through that encounter from your vantage point, from your viewpoint at the time.
Okay, yeah, but it was on it was on we would debate each other on various message boards, and it was on one particular one. I think it might have been a Wu Tang Clan message board, if memory serves me correct. I can't remember. It's been so long ago, but I think it was a Wu Tang Clan message board, and um we I was talking about Deuteronomy 28:68, and when he showed me the part in Deuteronomy 28:68 that says uh, Wahid Makartim that you just referenced, and it meaning, and you will offer yourselves for sale. I didn't. Um, at that time, I was just for the first time ever, I could say I had even heard about biblical Hebrew verb stems because I was reading his responses and explaining the verb stems and everything, but I didn't know what he was talking about at the time because I see GJC and all of these one-way scams with their fabricated Lashawan Kodash dialect don't even know about the existence of biblical Hebrew verb stems. So with hearing that from him, it was the first time that I even heard about the different verb stems, and I really didn't have a counter for anything that he said at the time because I didn't even know about these verb stems. Um, so I would. It was me and
If
another guy, huh?
if I could, just to that point that you're making, when Abu, and for the record, Abu himself is a student of Hebrew. You know, this is a guy who, in the grand scheme of things, and he'll say this, like in the grand scheme of things, he's not like an expert, right? He's just like a base level student. And yet Abu was able to come into that conversation and relatively quickly and easily point out something that the ICGJC didn't even teach its members because they're ignorant of Hebrew verb stems and things of that nature. Like they teach, like in the Hebrew Academy, how did the ICGJC, just so people can get an idea of the groups within the camp spectrum, because I know this isn't, I'm not equating this with all Hebrew Israelites. So I want people to know that this isn't like indicative of all Hebrew Israelites, but at least with the camps, and in particular, the original school, the ICGJC is the original One West. In the Hebrew Academy, what were they teaching regarding Hebrew? Like, how did that even look like when they taught Hebrew? Like, what did that look like from the vantage point of someone like yourself who was learning under them?
Well, first of all, they would start off teaching their, Lashawan Kodash alphabet, which I'll say it for the benefit of the listening audience that doesn't know what it is. It's A, Ba, Ga, Da, Ha, Wa, Za, Cha, Ta, Ya, Ka, Lama, Na, Sa, I, Pa, Tza, Ko, Ra, Sha, Ta. They would teach you this Lashawan Kodash alphabet, and then as far as words, they would teach you, basic Lashawan Kodash grammar. Um, the greeting shalom for hello, goodbye, and for thank you instead of toda, they would say the water. And for let me think, for um, for brother, they would say ach, but it would be pronounced AHCH. For sister, it would be wath with that wath at the end of it. Just then they would go on to teach you their idea of verb conjugations involve in most cases connecting the last two syllables of a word. I remember in the virtual New Hebrew Academy that they established during COVID, they actually had a video of a chief priest explaining this on a whiteboard. Um, he was writing it out on a whiteboard, and they had their own version of diacritics where it would be like a smiley face, and they would use this to connect the last two syllables. They call it a connector. The only instance when you wouldn't connect a the last two syllables as if the last syllable was a ah. Other than that, you would connect the last two syllables of a word in most cases. Um, and but beyond that, there was no uh, any advancement. Just a basic level understanding of Lashawan Kodash, basic words, learning how to connect syllables, and nothing beyond that. No actual present, past, future tense verb conjugations, nothing of the sort, nothing like that. Definitely no understanding of verb stems. So nobody really progressed beyond that basic level. That's why the majority of them can't even have a fluent conversation in Hebrew. Well, Lashawan
Right.
Kodash.
Yeah, in their fraudulent version of Hebrew, their fraudulent dialect. And the reason we say fraudulent dialect is because Willie, they're claiming that that dialect is the dialect that Moses and Christ and all the apostles and all the people of Israel spoke. But we have literally no evidence for that particular pronunciation system anywhere in antiquity, meaning how they're claiming that the Hebrew alphabet, the Hebrew consonants only make one possible vocalization. So it's basically all A class vowels. So it's like ah, ba, ga, da, and then you get to the only letter that makes a different sound than ah is the ayin that goes I. That's the only letter that makes a different sound. So, for example, in the name of Joshua, they'll pronounce it Yahawashai because you have an ayin at the end, and thus the ayin makes the I sound. So, if people are wondering why did they say Yahawashai, it's literally Yehoshua, but just remove all the actual vocalizations and introduce A class vowels and then the I sound at the end for the ayin. So it's basically Yahawashai. so um, but Willie, that's interesting that you mentioned though about so the way they were teaching it is basically with the connectors because I think that's of real interest to a good friend of ours, Abu, who's currently watching us. I sent him the link, so he should be watching this right now. Uh, what was the explanation that they gave for the connectors? Like, as far as you remember, the little smiley face, the frown, the little frown and smiley face that they would use underneath each consonant to try to indicate that this is. Explain how they would explain those connectors because they like to rail against the nikud, the nikudot in the diacritics that are found, for example, within the Masoretic text, and they like to rail against that, and they'll say that somehow supposedly introduce new vocalizations rather than preserving already existing vocalizations. So the connector system, how would they explain that? Like, did you ever get curious and ask them, inquisitive, and ask them, "Hey, what are these things?" Because you guys obviously would rail against the diacritics of the mainstream community. So, what was their explanation about the connectors?
Um, from what I remember, it was basically that those connectors were used to connect like I was saying before, the last two syllables of a word. And the
Gotcha.
only the only ex, the only exception to that would be if a word ended in ah. Like for example, the word to read would be qua ra ah because it ended in a ah. You would just leave the ah by itself. But other than that, like for example, with Moses, which is Moshe in the Hebrew, they would pronounce that as Masha because the shin and the he, or where in their case the Shah and the Ha will be connected together. So that's how you would get, you know, the Ma, the Shah, the Ha, and then you would connect the last two syllables to form Masha. That's
Hmm.
usually in most cases how they would do that.
Let me show people what we're talking about when we say connectors, because the audience who's unfamiliar with this subject, they might not know what we're talking about. So I'm gonna give them an example. Willie, give me a moment. Let me just pull this up on my screen. Just give me 1 second, y'all. Um, I want all of you to see what we're talking about when we say connectors. So there's a video on my channel that's called I'll tell you the name right now in a moment. It's Give me one moment. So the video is called Lashawan Kodash Exposed Modern Influence and LQ Diacritic Marks. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to this portion of the video here. Let me do it this way. All right. And this is what we're referring to when we say connectors. So this is an example of ISUPK, for example. They do their little classes. So if you guys can see right here on your screen, so hopefully you can see my mouse. Do you see it right there where you have these little lines? It looks like a little like frown. Then you have like a little smile, another frown. Here, let me y'all see this right here? These are the connectors that he's referring to. So for example, like this, do you see it right here where you have this, this, and this? This is a system that was developed at the ICGJC and also by the other groups that broke away from the ICGJC. So when you hear us talk about connectors, and so Willie, this is how they're coming to the conclusion that the that certain words are pronounced like certain ways, but also like for example, like the name Yasharala, right? Like, because some might say, well, how did they get Yasharala, right? Because it seems that with the system that they have in, because there are certain names, like for example, with the tetragrammaton, instead of it being like Yahweh, it's Yahweh, right? Rather than Yahweh, right? Because with Yasher Allah, it's like it should be Yasher all if they're going to be consistent, no? In the same way that they don't vocalize the last consonant for the tetragrammaton that they mispronounce Yahweh, instead of it being Yahweh, they pronounce it Yahweh. So Yasher Allah, shouldn't it just be Yasher al according to that system?
Um. Okay. Now I'll explain how they get Yasser Olive because a lot of people might not be privy to this. It took a lot of you know understanding how this Lashwankwadash worked in order to even understand this. So Yasser Allah, according to what they you know the Yah means he is, Shar means prince, Allah means power, and they put that all together. Yah Shar Allah, which literally means he is a prince of the power. That's how they get that.
You know what's interesting about that is that they're missing that the hyper literal parsing of that would not be the Prince of the Power. They're basing that on the King James translation, but the actual Hebrew has Yisrael, which literally means he strives or struggles with God. So you have a yod which serves as a when it's prefixed to the verb there is Sara and El, right? So El being the designation for the God of Israel. Sara is the word for striving or struggling. And so you have the Yod prefix to Sara and El. So it's Yisrael, literally. He, because the Yod serves as a second person construction there, he strives, struggles with God, which is why you have in our translations, and you have other translations, in fact, that predate the King James that would literally render it, he has strived or struggled with God. Um, and our modern translations also render it, he has strived, struggled with God. Uh, the JPS Tanakh, which is made by actual Jews, will render it, he has strived, struggled with God. So that goes to show you that one, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to parsing out verbs. They're really just reliant on whatever the King James says, which is precisely why they don't know that in Deuteronomy 28:68 the verb there is reflexive rather than being passive. So the passive construction would be nimkartem, the reflexive is wehit makartem. And they don't realize that in Deuteronomy 20:68 it's wehit makartem. Now, I find that fascinating because when you had your conversation with our friend Abu, when he pointed out that the verb is reflexive, um, at the time, do you remember how you attempted to explain to him when you were in the ICJJC? Because obviously you're seeing the what they call the ha and the tha at the beginning of makar, right? So makar is the verbal root of selling there. Um, when you saw the what you call the at the time what you were calling the ha, I'm imagining that you thought of the word the, like ha ma shayak, as you guys like to say in when you were in that camp, for the Messiah, meaning the Messiah, right? So how did you try to explain the tha there, what you guys called the tha? Because obviously the ha you probably had a response for, but the tha, and I'm sure that our friend Abu pointed that out right at the time. How did you attempt to explain the tha at the time in ha tha ma kartham?
I didn't really have a response for that. What I did was I tried to justify um more or less what it was trying to say in the in the King James version by saying that it can't be saying you would offer yourselves for sale, because why would a slave uh offer to sell themselves? And I was trying to say that the thumb in Hata Makar thumb meant you all, and Makar meant to sell, and that it was still rendered. I was basically trying to express that it was still rendered passive, but still not addressing the heat part of it.
Yeah.
But, that's basically how I was trying to go about, responding to that. Trying to, offer up the question, why would a slave offer themselves up for sale, not knowing, understanding why it was saying that, and then trying
But
to point out,
yeah.
huh? Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, just that's how I'll try to explain it. Asking the question of why would a slave offer themselves up for sale, and not really addressing the hay and the towel, but more or less focusing on the Tim and Makar Tim, saying that this means you all, and using that to say this is still saying that you will be sold rather than you offer yourselves for sale.
Right. Now, real quick, Willie, man, I wanted the audience to hear this video here, and so our friend Abu, he goes into, because I find this really fascinating. I don't think this is going to be too long. I think this might be a few minutes. I'll play some of it, but I want you to see, and I want the audience to see how the camp Hebrew Israelites that try to teach this dialect struggle even in how they explain it themselves. So Willie is giving you an explanation from the ICGJC perspective because that's the group that he came out of, and they are the original One West. But I want you guys to see even other guys that left the original One West school, like GMS, and some. You're gonna see how they struggle. I want everybody to see this, man. Watch this real quick. Here, let me. Now, Willie, do me a favor. Tell me if you can hear the sound. So let me just do a test. Were you able to hear that just now?
No, I wasn't able to hear it.
Okay, let me try it this way. Hold up. You know what it is? I know what it is now, Willie. Hold on. I know exactly what it is, man. Hold up. I gotta because I got my Bluetooth connected. Hold up. Let me just connect this. But man, keep talking. Go ahead, Willie. While I pull this up, man.
All right,
If you
but yeah,
yeah, good.
I really didn't have any. I really didn't address the hay in the town in front of in hit where it hit my cartoon, because, like I was explaining earlier, biblical Hebrew verb stems were new to me at the time that Abu mentioned it, and ICGJC doesn't really, they don't teach those at all. So I was really, if anything, his response kind of caught me off guard, and I didn't know what to say because I had never been taught those verb stems, never even knew about
And having that experience, man, I could imagine for a guy that's in a group that's teaching everybody that they're the only ones with the truth, that in that moment, not having an answer. And I imagine that's how most of these guys feel when they have these conversations with us. Not having an answer probably shakes them up, and they're almost forced to have to make something up on the spot, right? Like, did you feel like you had to pretty much come up with something so that you wouldn't look bad in front of this Christian at the time, and because of how ICGJC talks about Christians?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. And I just have to note it wasn't just me that was in that encounter. It was another guy that's still there. Ironically, we both were debating Abu. Um, it was another guy from it was a guy from World Headquarters that was with me debating him on this. And he was basically trying to say that because of how they break down Isaiah 28:10, that that's the correct way to get understanding of Scripture, and that going into other languages was foolish. That was his argument about it. But I really didn't have a actual response to his Abu's mentioning of the verb stems, because like I said, I didn't know anything about biblical Hebrew verb stems. And looking back at it in retrospect, I really wish that I had the mind to actually go further into learning, trying to actually learn what he was talking about. But I was young, I was 20 years old, and they had just got me into that doctrine. And I was a zealot, a young zealot, and I wasn't even thinking along those lines. But I wish I would have had the mind to try to study biblical Hebrew verb stems and just try to find out exactly what he was talking about.
Absolutely, man. By the way, I think I have the solution. Here it is. Hold on. Let me see if this works first. Hold up. Give me a second. You can hear me?
Yeah,
Willie, you can hear me? Yeah.
yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
Yeah, Willie, you could. Oh, my bad. Yeah, I just want I just want to make sure, man. I be getting paranoid when people can't hear me. All right, let me go ahead and play this video. Now, hopefully, it'll play. Hold on. Here.
System. Rather, I'm simply explaining it for
okay, I can
others.
hear it now.
There are certain proponents of Lashwan Kodash who will write in the Phoenician script and place curious marks under certain letters, resembling either a smile or a frown, depending on its location in the word, as you can see here. If you look closely at one of the oldest One West icons of Christ, you'll notice the same marks appearing there on the menorah which he was holding in his hand. By the way, on a side note, I have not seen anyone else point this out, but that's a curious spelling of the name, which is the name of Joshua. However, while it's not a biblical spelling, it's not completely a historical, as I have read that the medieval Italian Kabbalist Menachem Azadia da Fano apparently owned a Torah scroll with that spelling for the name Joshua. But anyway, let's get back to the subject of Lashawan Kodash diacritics. Here are some class notes from the original school in the early 90s, and you'll see the same marks appearing. Down at the bottom of the page, there's an explanation, and it states that the character that looks like a smile is to connect letters, and what looks like a frown is to separate them. To elucidate that, first recall that in Lashwan Kodash, if a character is vocalized, it only has one possible vocalization. And with the exception of the 16th character, the ayin, every character has an A class vowel, an ah sound. So ah, ba, ga, da for aleph, bet, gimel, daled, etc. So the when you see what looks like a frown, that signifies that the character takes its standard vocalization. However, when you see what looks like a smile between two characters, it signifies that the two characters are connected and the second one is unvocalized. So, for example, suppose we have a hypothetical word spelled with the Beit, Gimel, and Daled, the equivalents of B, G, and D. If the separator or the disconnector, what looks like a frown, appears under each letter, then the word is pronounced Ba, Ga, Da. However, if the separator or disconnector, what looks like a frown, appears under the first character, while a connector, what looks like a smile, appears under the last two characters, then the word would be pronounced bagad, because the last character is unvocalized. And likewise, if the connector or what looks like a smile appears under the first two characters, while a separator or disconnector, what looks like a frown, appears under the last character, then the word would be pronounced bagda, bagda. In short, while the first and third characters are pronounced, the second character is unvocalized. To have a little fun with this, we can actually use these diacritics to signify the different pronunciations employed by two elders of GMS, those being Tahar and Arayam Lab. They're different pronunciations of the word kadru, which is the third person plural verb that appears in Jeremiah 14:2. Now, as a disclaimer, their differing pronunciations are not intentional. I think if they were pressed on this, they would say that one of them had a slip of the tongue. Nonetheless, let's listen to the different pronunciations of Rayam Lab and Tahar.
Quada raw, quada raw, quadar wa. Quadar wa is here qua dar wa, qua dar wa.
So, because Tahar pronounces it quadra, the way to signify his vocalization or pronunciation is to put the separator or disconnector, which looks like a frown, under each of the first two characters, and then to put the connector, which looks like a smile, under the last two characters, quadra.
Quada raw.
In the case of Orion Lob's pronunciation or vocalization, he said Kodarwa. So you put the separator or disconnector under the first character, then a connector, which looks like a smile, underneath the second and third characters, and then another separator or disconnector, which looks like the frown, under the last character to get Kodarwa.
Quadarwa.
The different pronunciations implies a lack of standardization, which can have interesting potential implications. For example, let's listen to Arayam Lab describe how you say the phrase "my Lord" in Hebrew.
My Lord in the Hebrew is Adawanya. Adawan with an N with an I at the end. Adawan, that's Lord. Adawan Yah makes it possessive, my Lord. So Adawanya.
So Arayam Lab pronounces the word Adawanya. However, recall the way that Tahar pronounced the Resh Wa, the R and the W essentially. He pronounced it raw.
Raw.
Which then raises the question, why can't the Dalit Wa, the equivalent of D and W, be similarly pronounced Daw? With that in mind, rather than Adawanya, where you have a disconnector under the first and the second characters each, then a connector for the third and fourth characters and another separator under the last character, what if instead you had a connector under the second and third character and another connector under the fourth and fifth character, and you pronounced it Aldalnai? Now, admittedly, the system still doesn't permit one to distinguish between a plural noun and a singular noun, Adoni and Adonai, but nonetheless, Adonai seems to be moving a little bit closer to actual Hebrew. I thought that was interesting. Now, before I close, it's worth noting that these diacritical marks are completely ahistorical, or put another way, they're a completely modern innovation. There's no evidence of the ancient Phoenician script, ancient Paleo Hebrew, employing these diacritical marks. Rather, they were created by Arya. And that's ironic because Arya attacked the diacritical marks which appeared in the Masoretic text, the Nikodot. And the reason it's ironic is because he essentially rejected diacritics that are more than 1,000 years old on the grounds that they're not ancient, and yet replaces them with completely modern diacritics. Nonetheless, there was
My bad. I'm over here trying to yeah. So this section is missing an image, but man, I forgot to put the image in there. Yeah, shout out to Abu, man. I know. Actually, I'll play this section. I'll still play it. Let me go ahead and play it. All right, check this out. This really interesting, Willie. Listen to this part.
Pronounced shalom, pronunciation, a reason for diacritics places them. And it was part of an attempt to standardize Lashon Kodash pronunciation. Take, for example, the word on the screen here. In Lashon Kodash, is it pronounced shalom or shalama? Now, proponents of Lashon Kodash today might think that the answer is obvious, that it's obviously shalom. But there are old timers who remember Abba Bivens teaching instead that it was pronounced shalama.
Then I learned Derek Abbott. Derek Abbott is the one that Abba used to teach us.
Shalom, how they speak like that.
Yeah, it was instead of saying shalom, they say shalama.
Shalom.
They say barakata, and it was
So too with this word, which is the word for Israel. Is it pronounced Yasher Allah or is it pronounced Yasher Al? Most proponents of Lashon Kodash would say that Yasher Allah is standard, but you see more and more people saying Yasher Al. Although I have to give credit to Hashar, with a little bit of a tacit nod to Arabic, he's the first to slightly change the inflection. So rather than saying the standard One West Yasher Allah, he says Yasher Allah, which I kind of like.
Hey, Yasser Allah. Yasser Allah.
In short, there was an open question as to when the character is vocalized and when it's left unvocalized. And so the connectors and disconnectors, or connectors and separators, were introduced by Arya. Arya introduced these new diacritics to the Phoenician script, to so-called Lashon Kodash, in an attempt to standardize the pronunciation of his system. Now, of course, where exactly he added it is somewhat arbitrary, but that's nonetheless the history of Lashon Kodash diacritics.
Something. Arya is the innovator of the diacritic that was used at the old one, well, that's still being used at the old one West, which is the ICGJC, and is being used by other groups that aren't even in communion with him, or them, I should say. Man, it's insane to me to think all these years later, and none of these guys actually know Hebrew. Neither Arya actually knows Hebrew. Tazadakia didn't know Hebrew. None of the so-called apostles at the ICGJC knew Hebrew. And they're still teaching this system that's based on ignorance of Hebrew grammar, morphology, it's bad. Willie, I mean, is it not bad? Like this stuff is just, and to think, man, that you got people who have been in the ICGJC, like yourself and others who were there for years, for decades, for you it was 2 decades. You got people that were there probably in the 80s, that were in the school before it changed its name to the Israeli Church, to, when they were still known as the Israeli School of UPK, before the school even changed its name to ICGJC. And they've been probably teaching this stuff for years, teaching incorrect information, teaching an ignorance of the language. Willie, that to me speaks volumes about the cult mindset that these groups have. Nobody bothered to question this doctrine for years. And it's only until brothers like yourself and others leave this false doctrine that you finally get a chance to fact check it and you realize, man, they were teaching us incorrect information all this time, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that this doctrine going unchecked for years has played a major factor in its spreading. It's as much as it has. And the crazy part is that the spread of it within the past couple, I want to say maybe 5, 6, 7 years, isn't even due to ICGJC. It's due to IURC. Um, ICGJC has been on a steady decline for quite some time now, and I've known that, from being in there. You know, they messed around and let IUIC just completely take over and spread this nonsense to the point where IUIC has become the face of what a black Hebrew Israelite is in these times. Nobody's even talking about ICGJC anymore.
Mm, yeah, man. But man, but that's bad though in terms of because here's not that what's funny about it is IUIC took the other extreme. They tossed the baby out with the bathwater and pretended that there's no way to know what biblical Hebrew sounds like, and that's not true at all. We have a myriad of pieces of evidence to know exactly how biblical Hebrew sounded. We not only have the Masoretic text, which preserves already existing vocalizations, meaning those vocalizations were capturing pronunciations that already existed. But we also have, for example, transliterations left by the actual Israelites, verifiable Israelites in the Dead Sea Scroll, in the Greek scrolls that captured pronunciations from Hebrew into the Greek. The New Testament captures pronunciations. The Septuagint captures pronunciations. Philo's writings capture pronunciation. Josephus captures pronunciations. That to me shows that these guys are just ignorant of the history of the language. I'm saying for IUIC. And when they say that nobody knows, $1 million question for the nitwittedness of even making that statement. Your King James that you love so much was translated from manuscripts that were Hebrew and Greek. How did the King James translators make a translation if nobody knew Hebrew and Greek, or specifically Hebrew in this case? How were they able to successfully make a coherent translation? Even if the translation has its problems, it's still coherent for the most part. How were they able to do that if nobody knew Hebrew? I mean, like, did these guys not think about that before they made the mistake? In fact, doesn't the preface page of the 1611 say translated out of the original tongues? Wouldn't that mean that the people would have to know the original tongues in some capacity to make that translation? Yeah, so IUIC takes the other boneheaded approach. But ICGJC's approach is just as bad because they're teaching a fraudulent dialect and telling people this is how Moses and Christ spoke when they didn't use that dialect. And that's just one, man. Look, we spent this time just talking about one really dumb component of that doctrine. We haven't even gotten into the other really dumb components, like the 12 tribes chart breakdown that they give, or the idea that salvation is only for Israel. And you know something, Willie, the more that groups get away from the One West train of thought, the more that they have to adjust their doctrines, like and eventually realize, man, this stuff doesn't really have legs to stand on. It can't defend itself. For example, even Genesis, even though I just did a video recently on Hakah, he's had to move away from certain things that the group that he was a part of originally, Sakari, taught, and the group that they were a part of, GMS, taught or still teaches. And this stuff was just like passing the buck around, basically repeating what someone else had told them without fact checking it. And to think that it took them all this time to finally start to at least fact check some of the claims, which is why they've had to, even though they're still wrong, Genesis is still wrong, but they've had to gradually readjust their position because of how untenable the One West doctrine is. Because it's untenable. There is no defending that doctrine. It is indefensible, meaning you cannot coherently, properly defend that doctrine in any meaningful fashion. And it doesn't matter if you take IUIC's perspective. Their doctrine is indefensible too. Both of them, ICGJC and IUIC, are both promoting an indefensible doctrine. You know?
Exactly.
But Willie, go ahead. No, go ahead, brother. You want this?
Yeah. I'm actually, since we've been talking about, Yasha Allah, how they pronounce the name of Israel. I've got the Septuagint in front of me right now, and I'm looking at Genesis 32:28 in the Septuagint. Um, and I'm looking at the word Israel, and you can clearly see how the Jews that translated the Septuagint, they actually in translation carried over that Hebrew pronunciation of Israel into the Septuagint, Yisrael.
Thou hast prevailed with God. Yeah, because think about it this way: who was Jacob wrestling before his name was changed from Jacob to Israel?
He was
He
wrestling the angel.
he was wrestling. Well, and here's the interesting thing: angel there is just the generic word malak for messenger.
Mhm.
He's wrestling a messenger of whom Jacob said that I have seen the face of God and lived. Right?
Right.
I wonder who that messenger was. I wonder who that was. Just a little throw a little wink out there. We see him in the New Testament. but but what's interesting is that when he's wrestling this messenger and he sees him, he is sincerely of the belief that he is seeing God. And thus his name is changed by this same messenger, wink wink, to Yisrael, which means you have prevailed with God or struggled or striven, because the word there for prevail in the Greek is the word for striving or struggling, which is what he was doing. He was wrestling, struggling with the angel. Remember, give me the blessing. I will not let you go unless you give me the blessing, right?
Right.
It's like they seem to forget that part of the encounter, right?
Right. Exactly. And it's like the thing that, and I think I remember Abu touching on this, in one of his videos. If Israel in Hebrew really meant it really was pronounced Yasharallah, don't you think the Jews that were translating from Hebrew to Greek, they would have had more than enough Greek characters to transliterate that as Yasharallah, if in fact that was the way you say that.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at it, it's clearly uh, Israel or Yisrael
Right.
in the Septuagint. So that means that in Hebrew it was always Yisrael.
Mm-hmm. Right. I've always found it fascinating though when we get into you know when we get into these discussions with these guys. And for the record, I just want to be clear that there are other English translations that also render the relevant phrase as um you know uh you know because you are have power with God and prevailed, something like that. They'll render it that way. One that comes to mind is the Geneva Bible, just for the record. But I've also seen translations of the period that also render it the way it hyper literally reads. You have struggled with God. And the Septuagint bears witness to that. An ancient translation made by ancient Jews bears witness to the reading strived, struggled, or prevailed with God, right? So I find it fascinating that our friends like don't know that. You know what I mean? Like that seems a little odd to me that they're unaware of that because of course they're sticklers for the King James, right? They're KJV only, right? Specifically in this case, the ICGJC, they're KJV only, right, Willie? They won't use any other translation.
Right, right. They're KJV only. They I've actually seen them do radio shows trying to prove that modern English translations like the NIV is wrong because they'll point out that certain verses are missing, or they'll read the way that the NIV translates the verses and try to say that they're wrong. But yeah, they're KJV only, to their own detriment, of course.
Mm-hmm. And for the audience, let me explain what this idea of verses are missing. So they're showing their ignorance of textual criticism, right, Willie? It's not that the King James is preserving already existing verses and the modern translations are removing the original reading. It's the other way around. The King James version adds 18 verses, for example. You ever seen that meme where it says the modern translations remove 18 verses? It's the other way around. The King James adds 18 verses because the 18 verses are glosses that are not found in our oldest copies of the Greek, or in some cases, even some of our copies of the Hebrew, depending on what verse we're talking about. So, a famous example of that would be 1 John 5:7, which is in the King James, but isn't in our oldest copies of the Greek. Another example would be the ending of Ephesians 3 and 9. Another one is I believe it is John. Here, let me make sure. I just want to be extra sure. I believe, yeah, it's John chapter 5. So the one that talks about the angel whirling the pool or whatever the case is. Yeah, that one is also a gloss. There's a few others, but if I could, let me. Oh, I see Willie dropped out. Wait till Willie comes back. But I'll go ahead and pull this up for the audience. Yeah, let me actually do this real quick. Yeah, let me see if I could and this is sad that I'm posting an article that they could easily have Google searched for themselves, man. Like this is something they could have easily have Google searched. Yeah, there goes Willie. All right, let me bring you back, Willie. My bad. Yeah, so this is something that could easily have been Google searched, what I'm about to show. Now, for the record, I don't agree with this article's what it says about the longer ending of Mark. I think there's actually a defense to be made for the longer ending of Mark. So I don't agree with this article's assessment about the longer ending of Mark, for the record. Just so we're clear, I don't necessarily agree because that's one example that does have a good defense in its favor. But if you guys could see my screen, it says, if you compare the King James Version and the New King James Version with the newer translations like the New International Version, English Standard Version, Christian Standard Bible, and even the New Living Translation, etc., you will notice that several verses are entirely missing from the newer translations. Here, hopefully you guys can see the screen so you can see the text. No, it's a little too big. You guys can see that, right? You guys are able to see this, so this way, yeah, brothers can see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, cool. Now it says examples of missing verses and passages are John 5 and 4, Acts 8:37, 1 John 5:7. Another example is Mark 16:9 through 20, although that passage is always placed in the text or in footnotes. In addition to the few missing verses, there are numerous words and phrases that are missing from newer translations. Why do these translations omit these verses, phrases, and words? Are newer translations taking verses out of the Bible as some claim? No. The newer translations are not removing verses from the Bible. Rather, the newer translations are attempting to accurately present what the biblical writers originally wrote. And that means leaving out anything that was not a part of the original text. Any content, quote unquote, missing in newer translations is believed by most scholars to not have been in the Bible to begin with. The KJV was translated in 1611 AD. The New Testament translators of the King James Version used a Greek manuscript known as the Textus Receptus. That was what they used for the New Testament, for the record. Since that time, many biblical manuscripts have been discovered that predate the Textus Receptus, and these older manuscripts, in theory, are likely to be more accurate. In their research, Bible scholars and textual critics have discovered some differences between the Textus Receptus and the older manuscripts. It seems that over the course of 1,500 years, some words, phrases, and even sentences were added to the Bible, either intentionally or accidentally. The quote-unquote missing verses mentioned above are simply not found in some of the oldest and most reliable manuscripts. So the newer translations remove these verses or place them in footnotes or in brackets because the translators believe they do not truly belong in the Bible. For example, John 5 and 4 included in the King James Version, but in the New King James Version, the verse has a footnote attached explaining that it is not found in many Greek texts. The NASV includes the verse in brackets. The NIV places the verse in a footnote. So John 5 and 4 is quote unquote, so it says, so John 5 and 4 is quote unquote missing in the actual text. The disputed portion is this: waiting for the moving of the waters, for the angel of the Lord went down at a certain seasons in the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in, was made well from whatever disease which he was afflicted. Here is a possible explanation of how John 5 and 4 ended up in the Bible. A scribe is writing out John 5, in which Jesus visits the pool of Bethesda. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years, according to John 5, 3 through 5. But then the scribe gets to verse 7 as Jesus speaks to the man about his desire to be healed. And the man says, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. The scribe considers the man's reference to stirred water as a source of possible confusion, as John does not expound on it. So the scribe writes a quick note in the margin to explain why the invalid was waiting, for the quote unquote stirred water. An angel came down at certain times to make something special happen. The scribe's notion was an attempt to aid the reader in understanding scripture. But then, as more and more copies of that manuscript were made, the scribe's marginal note was transferred from the margin and inserted into the actual text as a part of the passage. It may be that the later copyists misconstrued the intention of the marginal note. Instead of being a commentary of sorts, the note was seen as the scribe's attempt to correct the mistake, inserting a verse he had accidentally left out. Thus, what the scribe meant as a helpful gloss resulted in John 5 expanding by one verse, meaning it added a verse that wasn't originally there. It's important to remember that the verses in question are of minor significance. None of them change in any way the crucial themes of the Bible, nor do they have any impact on the Bible's doctrines. Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, Christ being the only way of salvation, and the doctrines of heaven and hell, sin and redemption, and the nature and character of God. These doctrines are preserved intact through the work of the Holy Spirit, who safeguards the Word of God for all generations. It is not a matter of the newer translations missing verses. It is not a matter of the it is not a matter of the newer translations missing verses, and it is not a matter of the King James translators adding to the Bible. It is a matter of determining through careful research and textual science what content was most likely a part of the original manuscripts of the Bible. So I'll just end there. Yep. You know, the whole time I didn't realize my screen was black this whole time, man. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if y'all see that, but so I thought I was sharing this whole time. All right, let me see if I could do this. So just so the audience doesn't think they were looking at a black screen the whole time, man. I thought I was sharing the whole time, man. Hold up. Okay, so I'll just reshare what I was reading. I just X'd out. Hold up. So this is what I was reading for those who are curious. This is from gotquestions.org. And all this took was a quick Google search. That's what's sad about this, right? This didn't take a great deal of effort. All this took was just a little bit of Google search, man, to actually get the answer, which most of these guys don't even bother to do. Let me actually, y'all see that on the screen? Y'all see that now? Yeah, hopefully y'all can see that. This is what I was reading the whole time. So nobody can accuse me of just like making this up. So yeah, man, that's bad, man. Like these guys not even having a basic understanding of textual criticism. It's like really bad, man. You know?
Yeah, it's because they're so stuck on their misunderstanding of Isaiah 28 and 10. They really think that that's the only way to get understanding of scripture.
Yeah, and I have a video on my channel debunking their misunderstanding of Isaiah 28 and 10. So for the Hebrew Israelites that are watching, if you go to the video tab of this channel, you'll see the video debunking your misunderstanding of Isaiah 28 and 10 with its proper context in mind by looking at the Hebrew and even the way you misconstrue Psalm 119, 104 and looking at the reality that the Hebrew word that's used there that's rendered precept in English isn't even the same Hebrew word that's used in Isaiah 28 and 10, since most of you don't even bother to look at the Hebrew text. But anyways, with that, and also a lot of you don't bother to read Isaiah. Oh, you guys don't even bother to realize that the words must be aren't in the Hebrew of Isaiah 28 and 10, where it says precept must be upon precept. The words must be are in italics in critical editions of the King James. That means they're not in the original Hebrew of that verse. And Isaiah 28 and 13 gives the understanding. But the word of the Lord was unto them, unto the people, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little, that they should go, fall backwards, be broken, snared, and taken. It was a word of rebuke against both houses. If you read verse 14, and if you read at the beginning of 1 through 8, it's a rebuke against the northern kingdom of Ephraim and the southern kingdom of Judah. You see how easy that is to understand just doing that off the top of the head? Very easy. Byron,
Yeah.
come up in this live stream if you could. Yeah, so Byron, come up in here, man. I posted the link in the chat. I want you to jump up in here. Any question you have will be answered. But before we get to your questions, I want you to demonstrate your claim of being an Israelite if you believe that you're an Israelite. All right. I see Jason up in here. What's going on, Jason?
What's up, faithful man? A long time listener, man. Long time listener.
Yep, I appreciate the love and support, brother.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything you wanted to ask, brother?
It was more like I had like a theory, especially when it relates to when other brothers try to bring up Revelations 1 and 14, 15 to try to give like a physical appearance for Jesus, even though John said, I think in verse 9, that he was in the spirit when he started to see all of these things, but they choose to put a physical appearance on something that John clearly said he was in the physical, and it you know, in the spiritual. The main thing is that when it kind of frustrates me a little bit because they seem to be very deceptive, especially when it comes to placing metal in the furnace. And then what a lot of them will do is, is they'll like use the example of like taking a lighter and quote unquote burning a piece of metal and seeing the soot from the burning metal and saying, hey, this is what the Bible was talking about when it's, showing that color of Jesus. And I just think that it's very deceptive. And like the main thing that I
By
wanted
the
to
way, I
ask
have
you.
a video debunking their misunderstanding of that. So if you're
Okay, cool.
interested in how to refute that, if you go to the video tab on my channel, I have a video refuting their misuse of Revelation 1:14 through 15, their
Okay.
misuse of Daniel 7 and 9, Daniel 10 and 6, and their misuse of Job 30 and 30. Because they're and also Jeremiah 14 and 2. But in particular, if you want the one on Revelation, you'll see it. I have an image of like their so-called version of Christ, and you'll see the thumbnail. And then if you just type in Revelation 1:14 through 15, you'll see the video.
Okay.
I'll give the abridged explanation. So number one, they don't realize that you have a phrase there, halko libano, which is a compound word. So I'm going to show you how that word is defined in the Greek. It's defined as two different metals, none of which are dark in color, number one. So we can even just start there,
Oh, cool. Because that's what I really had my theory about. Because if you look at the word that's used in the text, it
Yeah, you
clearly
see it
says,
right here.
okay.
You see the word. This is Revelation 1:15. You see the word there in the Greek,
Hold on,
halko libano.
let me blow my screen up a little bit. Yes, I see it.
Okay, so this is how that word is defined. Let's go to the Thayer's Greek lexicon. Do you see where it says right here, a certain kind of yellow frankincense? And the reason why frankincense is being mentioned is because halkon libanos is the transliteration for frankincense, and halkos is the Greek word for like burnished bronze. So
Okay.
if you look, you'll notice it right here. Here, it says a certain kind of yellow frankincense. Both the sense of the passage in Revelation and a comparison of Daniel 10:6 and Ezekiel 1:7, which seem to have been in the writer's thought, compel us to understand some metal like gold, if not more precious. So do you notice where it says a metal composed of gold and silver? So it's not
Okay.
even a dark colored metal, number one. It says the word is compound, no doubt. You see that? The word is a compound, no doubt, of halkos and libanos. And it says, you see this right here? So what's not being conveyed here is the idea that Christ is a Caucasian, that his ethnicity is not what's in view here. It's what kind of metal is being described, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll see that libanos is the word for frankincense. You see it right there?
Yes.
Halkos is the word for bronze, brass, copper. So it's yellow metal, as you can see right here. It says, some metal like gold, if not more precious, a metal composed of gold and silver.
Gotcha.
All right. That's how you kill their doctrine. What they're gonna do is go to things like Daniel 10 and 6, and they're gonna see in the King James, it's gonna say like the color, because this is where they're gonna look at the King James right here, and it's gonna say because they're gonna try to make a tie-in with this, and it's gonna say, and his arms and his feet were like in color to polished brass, right?
Okay.
Number one, all we have to do is go to the Septuagint reading, which is now this is the Greek of the Septuagint. Let me get the translation. Let me actually get the so everybody can actually read along. See, where is the translation of the Septuagint? I'll pull it up in a second. Here, let's actually go to the Hebrew first. And it says, in gleam. Do you see where it says an eye like the gleam
I
of
got it.
polished bronze, like the gleam?
That's it.
K'en. If you click on that, it's the word ayin, which is the word for eye, sight, appearance. Thus, that's why the NASB more accurately renders it like the gleam of polished bronze. So it's the gleam. All right. Now, how do I know that I'm not just making, like, so people could accuse me of somehow making this up? Well, let me actually pull the Septuagint. Here, let me actually, that's Daniel 10 and 6. Brenton's Septuagint. Here it is. I got it right in front of me. I'm about to show it right now. And when you look at the Septuagint translation, look what it says. Daniel 10 and verse 6. Now look how it reads. Remember it said like the gleam. That was the modern translation. This is an older translation than the King James. This is made by the actual Israelites. The King James wasn't made by Israelites. This was made by Israelites. And it says, and his body was as stars, and his face was as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and legs as the appearance of shining brass. As the appearance of shining brass. So how did the ancient Jews understand that? Did they think he had the color of like brown brass or something like that? No, he had the appearance of shining brass, yellow brass that shines. Not because he was a Caucasian, but because he's seeing a supernatural vision of a being in front of him. Some argue that this is an angelic being. Some will say that this is the pre-incarnate Christ. Regardless of what perspective one takes, what he's not seeing is somebody that has like brown skin, like people of color, like our people. Like, nah, man. Like, you see this? So this is how this is properly understood. You see it as the appearance of shining brass? And they're misappropriating this passage because they're trying to read color into verses where it doesn't exist. And they're going to go to Daniel 7 in the King James. This is another one they're going to misuse. They're going to go to verse 9 and they're going to say, and I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. See, it's talking about the texture until you actually go to the Aramaic there. So this portion was composed in Aramaic, and it's ka'amar. Notice ka'amar, like wool. It says, and the hair like wool. Now, when we go here, you'll notice when we actually look at the relevant definition, scriptural occurrence, and it talks about how it's used. It says Daniel 7:9 is the sole Old Testament passage that employs the Aramaic phrase. The prophet testifies his clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was like pure wool. The word appears within the vision of a heavenly courtroom glory, describing the radiant head of the Ancient of Days. Prophetic context. Daniel's night visions unveil successive earthly empires overrun. So it talks about so here's the part I want to focus in on. It says, the single mention of the relevant Aramaic phrase anchors the scene in a vivid sensory language. Pure, brilliant whiteness accentuates God's moral perfection and sovereign authority. Symbolic themes, purity and holiness. White imagery throughout scripture signifies freedom from defilement. And we're going to get to Isaiah 118 in a second because this is the key to unlock it all. The depiction of hair like pure wool portrays the judge whose character is flawless and righteous. Notice it says the depiction of hair like pure wool. So it's talking about color. Ancient wisdom. Snow white hair denotes venerable age and limitless experience. So it gives Proverbs 16:31 where it talks about the hoary head. In Daniel 7, the Ancient of Days embodies timeless insight unmatched by any earthly ruler. The majestic courtroom motif underscores uncompromising justice. The whiteness of the divine appearance epitomizes unassailable legal integrity. And they're missing that because they're trying to read like texture there. They're trying to read these notions of modern English ideas into a text that's ancient Semitic. So let's actually go here. Look, even if you read it in the King James, let me actually pull the King James. Look what it says right here. This is Isaiah 118. This is the backdrop of how the ancient Israelites used snow and wool to indicate color and never texture. Come now and let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Notice that wool and snow are being used for synonyms of color, not of texture, and then one is color and the other is texture. Notice that wool is just wool there. Does that mean that the sins become kinky? That they become woolly? No. That means that the sins become white like snow, white like wool, right? Not, oh, white like snow, but kinky like wool. That wouldn't make any sense if you're talking about sins, right? And it wouldn't make any sense if you're talking about the color of the hair of someone rather than talking about the texture. Like somehow these guys are thinking like modern American English speakers or something. Psalm 147 verse 16. Here's another example to show you that when Hebrew Israelites make this argument, they're showing you that they don't know the text and how it's used, the language of the text. Verse 16, he giveth, he meaning God Almighty, giveth snow like wool. Does that mean he gives woolly snow, kinky snow? Or does it mean that he gives snow the color of wool, the color of white wool? Yeah, snow the color of white wool.
Correct.
You notice that? There's another one where it says, oh man, there's another one that escapes me, but that's how it is consistently used. Even in Daniel 7 and 9, notice it says his garments were white like snow and his hair like the pure wool. The pure wool, white wool, unblemished wool, not the texture of wool. But because they're trying to read asinine ideas into the text, they're coming to these wild conclusions. Because they're trying to read modern American notions of race into a text that doesn't operate in that standard, right?
I mean, that's a good point. And also, you know, if you kind of think about it, right? If you kind of like go with their interpretation of the metal being burnt, that black that you see on metal, that's like an impurity. So you're kind of comparing the perfect and pure God to something that's impure. You know,
Impure. Yeah, ironically. Yeah.
I think in like Ezekiel or something like that, it talks about putting metals in the furnace and burning off
Yeah.
the dross. And if you kind of like think about it in a spiritual sense, brass is like it's an alloy. You know, it's two, like you just said,
Yeah.
you know, it's two different metals coming together. And if you think about it spiritually, that's kind of like what the church is. It's
Let
two,
me show you.
it's like
Let me
two
let me show.
different, it's the Gentiles and
Yeah.
the Israelites coming together in Jesus, and then by you doing that, you put that in a furnace to burn off all of the you know, to combine
Yeah.
and also burn off the impurities. And that's what we are. We are the body of Jesus. So to put a color on that when it's something that's talking about something spiritual, I think is just so deceptive, you know.
So look at this on the screen real quick. Do you see this right here? This is perpomenes, right? Perpomenes is the Greek word that's used there, which is translated as they burned, right?
Mhm.
Here, let me show you something. So this is the usage of that word. to kindle, to be ignited, glow, literally be refined, by implication or figuratively, to be inflamed with anger, grief, or lust. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to Christ because this has dynamic usage. And depending on how the word is used in the context, context is king. So in the case of Christ, we'll see how it's being used here. Here, let me actually, we could actually look at the, yeah, perfect participle, made to glow, Revelation 1:15, full of fire, fiery, ignited. And all because they're misreading what's being said there. That's crazy, isn't it? Now look what it says. Imagery of consuming fire in scripture. Fire constantly symbolizes God's holy presence, both comforting and terrifying throughout the canon. So it gives all these verses. The Strong's Greek 4448 evokes this motif by describing what is set ablaze, refined, and internally ignited. Whether literal or metaphorical, the verb portrays intensity that tests or transforms. So let's go to the usage as it's used in Revelation. Revelation 1:15 presents the exalted Christ, whose feet were like polished bronze refined in a furnace. The perfect participle underscores a completed yet abiding refinement in Lord's glorified humanity. So in other words, the idea is that what he's seeing is Christ in his supernatural state before John, showing like perfection, essentially, showing his glory. That's the problem that they're missing. In Revelation, the term magnifies Christ Jesus Christ. His feet, perpetually gleaming from furnace refinement, proclaims victory over judgment. His counsel to buy gold refined by fire identifies him as both refiner and treasurer. The same fire that judges an unbelieving world perfects the faithful, demonstrating continuity between his priestly ministry now and his royal judgment to come. All because they're trying to read color into a verse that has nothing to do with skin color.
Exactly.
They miss that beautiful narrative because these guys read the Bible almost like a white supremacist. If you think about it, it's just a white supremacy in blackface. Like my brother Damon Richardson, shout out to him. He calls the Hebrew Israelite doctrine white supremacy in blackface.
Yeah, they talk about the white man mode, then they talk about God. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, if I could, let me actually show y'all, because I like the NIV, believe it or not, its translation of that verse. This is all you got to do is just, you ain't got to, when they try to tell you, oh, you got to be the King James. Nah, brother. The King James is not the standard on how we interpret this text, because the King James came about 1,600 years after the fact. So we can use better translations than the King James if you want to go that route. All right. It's not like
That's why I
Bible
read the
translation.
message.
Now look what it says right here. It says, his feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace. You see that? I like that translation because I think it encapsulates the Greek there. That's all you got to do. That's how you beat that bad understanding. So it ain't talking about Christ's feet looking burnt. It ain't talking about his hair being the color white, but then the texture of wool. That ain't what that's talking about, man. You know? Now, but y'all go ahead, brothers. Give me 1 second. I'm listening. I just got to do something. It's gonna take me like 2 minutes. So y'all talk amongst yourselves for a second.
All right, cool.
Hey, brother Jason, how you doing, bro?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm right here, just trying to, just bounce a few ideas off, because, I deal with this, a lot. And, I just try to stay in my Bible. And the good thing about it, though, is, I must say, to have this a part of my life, the dealing with this, because I will admit, before I didn't really read my Bible that much. I really didn't. I was just the typical Christian dude, show up to church and then, what I'm saying, and going home. But doing this, especially when the camp guys, they approach you and they seem to have so much knowledge about the Bible, and it's wrong, But since you really haven't studied, you really can't rebut it. So it's really had me read my Bible and study a lot. I think that was all like it's the Lord's plan because before I wasn't doing that at all. Reading and studying, but from that, yeah, man, I've been in my Bible heavy. So and because I try to like help my family who's in that, but sometimes they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear yet. So I mean, I pray for them. You feel me?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the best thing that you can do for anybody that that's in this doctrine heavy, because um that's the only thing you can do is pray for them and continue to pray for them, because I know for myself from being a hardcore, like die hard for this doctrine and stuff
Oh,
like
gotcha.
that. You get to the point where can't nobody tell you nothing.
Mm,
Um,
I
that's
see.
yeah, so that's the only thing you really can do. You know what I'm saying? Is pray for somebody that's really entrenched into this doctrine, because
Correct, man.
you can't argue nobody out of a cult.
That's a good
That's
point. That's a good point, man. Because you know what? And then and I get like kind of frustrated at times because I show them biblically. I mean, what I'm saying, I don't like just come with my own type of knowledge and understanding secular type of stuff. Nah, I go straight to the text and oftentimes I use the same text that they try to like prove their stuff on, and I use that same text in the same book, and they still just don't believe it. They like, nah, you're reading that wrong, man. You're reading that wrong. And I'd be like, all right, man. What I'm saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do for you. I'm gonna just pray for you, big dog. But to be honest, when it first came about, in my life, like when you first are indoctrinated in it, it's so seductive, like, because it makes you feel like, yeah, I'm a part of something, and and this is me, and I can see myself in the Bible and all of this things of that nature, and it really appeals to your flesh a lot. But I thank God, man, because what I'm saying is, as soon as I started to see myself start to like lean toward it, and He made me read the Bible, and the more I read the Bible, the more I saw inconsistencies in what they were talking about. And then the more I started to read, I was like, nah, man, this ain't even right. You know what I'm saying? So yeah,
Yeah.
man, it's a very seductive type of mindset, because it appeals to what people have always appealed to. And that's self, because what I'm saying, because
And
look,
real quick, brother Jason, real quick, just
go ahead,
not
man.
not to cut your wisdom, just
Oh, no,
real quick
you good, man. I'm just going off.
to the brother Willie, because Jason had made a really interesting point. Brother Willie, how many guys in the ICGJC would you venture have actually read the Bible cover to cover? Like, I'm saying from not the leadership, I'm saying the regular people, like people like yourself. How many members actually read the Bible in context or actually read it cover to cover? Because they teach y'all not to read in context. They teach you to basically just memorize the precepts, right?
right.
So, Jason, that same thing applies to guys in IUIC. Most of those guys that you see out there haven't actually read the Bible.
Okay.
Here's the difference, right? You weren't, and you could be honest, right? I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat, brother.
No,
I'm
no,
not
you
trying to
good.
do this. But I imagine like you didn't read. I'm saying that to you, brother. I'm saying you didn't read none of the Bible, right?
Oh, me, man. No, shoot. What? Up until I think, what, 2000 and what? I say
Well, I'm saying is that
2011.
like if like you probably knew John 3:16, but outside of that, you didn't really have a grasp of the Bible as a
That
whole, right?
that is, man. You hit that right on the head, faithful. Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So watch this, brother. Because there's a reason I'm bringing that up. Them guys are only one slight step above you.
Got you.
All they're doing is memorizing certain verses.
Hmm.
They don't actually know the whole Bible. But for those of us who have actually read the Bible cover to cover, have read it in its the text of New Translation, that's why we have the advantage over them, because as soon as we start asking them the right questions that they don't have, because that's where, like, that feeling that you had with them, except you knew that they were wrong, you just
Yeah, I
didn't know
knew.
how
I
to
just don't prove
defend it.
it.
But watch this. But watch this. With them, they have that same feeling when they're encountering Christians like me and Vocab and others who know the Bible better than them.
Right.
They have that unnerving feeling of, man, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to answer this. The difference is that they're in a lie, they're in a deception, and all they can do is fall back on a script.
Mm.
So, Brother Willie, if a Christian would have caught you up back when you were in ICGJC, because this brother was in the original One West, Willie, when you were in the ICGJC, the original One West school, if a Christian, and you did have encounters, if a Christian would have called you up, what was the diversion tactic that you were taught that you would use to get them off of your tail and try to get them into something else so that this way they wouldn't expose you in that you didn't know the Bible like that? Like, what would you have used, or what did you use to try to divert the conversation in a different direction, brother? Yeah, give people the 411 on what you would do.
Well, basically, one thing that I mean, I can't say that I ever use this tactic because it's very rare. You know, aside from that one encounter with a boo that somebody would really trip me up like that, but I can just tell you, speaking from what others have been through when they've gotten, tripped up, is the default to asking somebody what the nationality was. you know, because they, that's it's this whole deal. You want to ask somebody what their nationality is for what reason? Looking back on it, what is the point? I know it's an identity cult, and you want to try to make the whole deal about trying to gather people based on what you think their nationality is because you want to teach them who you think the Israelites are. But that's one thing that I've noticed that people have tried to do to divert their attention talking to somebody new when they feel like, oh, this person might know something, is to try to change the subject and make it be about what somebody's nationality is.
Right. And so I can tell y'all the way that these different groups operate. And so brother Jason, so you understand their tactic.
Oh
For
yeah.
example, IUIC will tell their members, and I know this because I've interviewed several members of IUIC. They will instinctively try to bring it back to the law. Brother, you ain't got no beard. You don't got no fringes, brother. You don't keep no feast days. It'll be like that to get you off of the actual topic that you're bringing up. So let's say y'all talking about the Trinity, or y'all talking about Christ being God,
Right.
and you're catching them up. You're really catching them up bad.
Hmm.
They're gonna immediately shift the conversation that they're talking about the law to distract you from the actual conversation being had. That's IUIC.
I see.
Um, other groups might do this, right? Another tactic that you might see is, especially if you encounter them out at camp. And Willie, you tell me if ICGJC used to do this too. They'll all in unison start chanting loud, loud, loud over and over and over. It'll be whatever. It could be like something like, um, uh, it could be like that verse in Proverbs, answer a fool not according to his answer a fool not according to his folly. Or brother, give me Titus 3:9. Titus 3:9. But avoid foolish questions. See, foolish questions, brothers asking foolish questions. It'll be like something like that to try to shame you, to get you away from actually discussing what you guys were talking about. Let's say y'all were having a whole conversation, but you're catching up this guy really good. Some of them will go and pull that up just so that it shuts you down from asking any difficult questions that they don't have answers for. So anything that you ask that's difficult that goes against the doctrine, they're going to pull Titus 3:9, but avoid foolish questions. You know what I mean?
Hmm. I got you.
Yeah, definitely that whole going to certain verses and that whole repetitiously shouting the part of the verse over and over. That's basically thought control at work.
Yeah.
You're doing that over and over to shut the person down and drown them out. Yeah, that's definitely a ICGJC camp tactic.
Or how about this one? Here's another tactic. IUIC will have a doctrine. Not IUIC, pardon me. ICGJC will have a doctrine. Hold on one second. Hold on. My bad, man. I'm over here. Y'all got me. I'm getting little bites in. You know what I'm saying? Getting a little snack in. Uh, mm. I just don't want you to hear me with food in my mouth. Mm.
Leftovers.
IUIC will, or ICGJC, pardon me, will literally tell their members, for example, because I've talked to Miguel about this. They'll have like a secret breakdown that nobody knows about. So remember, you and I were talking about this, Willie, the secret manna of revelation, or there's another one that escapes me right now. Uh oh, their whole Abanawa Yahweh doctrine concerning Christ. You know, how can Christ have a name? How can Christ have a name that's above every other name if he has a name that's like everybody else? And then they'll use that to try to trip the person up if they feel they're being cornered. So they'll have their little in-house doctrine that a lot of people aren't privy to, and then they'll attack you with that to divert the conversation to that topic. So it's an attempt of them. It's an attempt for them to try to make the person look like they don't know what they're talking about. Now, Willie, you can verify that ICGJC does that, right? Like if that's a tactic, that's another tactic that they utilize. If they feel the conversation isn't going in their favor, they'll bust out one of their homegrown doctrines to try to stump the person.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And that the one that you just mentioned, where they changed the understanding to God the Father being Abanawa and Christ being Yahweh. That's definitely one of them that they hold over other camps as being exclusive, because they use that to say only we know the true name of Jesus Christ, and God the Father's name, His name isn't known, and you have to wait for His name to be revealed. You know, their ICGJC is like they're known for putting it out there that we have doctrines that are exclusive to us. The rest of you guys from these other camps, your leaders don't know it because they left out or they got put out and they missed out on the spirit of God that came through the Holy God sent comforters, so they don't have this exclusive knowledge that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that's a diversion tactic. And so Jason, you're gonna encounter that with different camps. Different camps are gonna have different tactics. So I want to read this message from Tavares Best. They say, precepts we were taught to use precepts and half scriptures to sway the conversation back to whatever point we were trying to make. Keep the conversation in line with the precepts that we were taught. Yeah, so in IUIC, ex-IUIC members have told me the same thing, that when the conversation gets heated or it gets like, too hot to handle, basically bust out the so-called precepts, which is really just their so you know what a precept is in their doctrine, Jason.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because one time I got encountered, before I started to read and stuff like that, and they had brought up John 3:16, and I was like, yeah, man, yeah, it's for everybody, and then he brought up precepts, and he
Isaiah 45:17. Yeah,
and
Isaiah
yeah, yeah,
45,
and
17.
then
World without end in the King James. Yeah.
yeah, and then they took me all the way back to the Numbers 21, I think it is, and I was like, oh, all right. So it was just the Israelites until I started to read, and then I saw in Exodus 13 and 38 that the multitude went with them. So when the
Mm-hmm.
snakes was biting everybody, they was biting the Israelites
Yeah.
and a multitude as well. So
Let me
go ahead.
did you ever learn how to rebut them on John 3:16?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I was kind of getting into with Exodus 13 and 38 when they refer back to the Numbers 21 and 4. I always say when the snakes was biting the Israelites, they was also biting the multitude as well. So when it says whoever looked at that bronze serpent, got saved, because it wasn't just other Israelites there
Yeah.
in the camp at the time.
Although
So
they're gonna go to the book of Numbers where it talks about the mixed multitude being destroyed. Here, let me show you how you cut all of that. I'm gonna show
okay.
you how to easily cut all of that. Okay.
Mhm.
One in John 3:16, they're gonna point out for those who are a little more savvy, because IUIC won't do this because they'll stay away from the Greek or the Hebrew. But for the groups that use Greek that will try to make appeals to Strongs or stuff like that, they're gonna go to Blue Letter Bible. The groups that like to use Blue Letter Bible are gonna go there. Now, Willie, correct me if I'm wrong. I see GJC. Did they have y'all using Blue Letter Bible at some point, or nah? I'm just wondering because I know GMS does this, and Sakari and other groups have done this.
No, they didn't have us using it.
Okay. So this is what they're gonna do, brother Jason. All right. So
Okay.
let me actually take that comment off the screen. Yeah, man. Let me actually make this text larger. Hold on me.
Let me look.
Okay. This is what they're gonna do for the groups that use Blue Letter Bible, and they misuse this resource. This resource ain't saying what they're saying. Hold on, let me actually get this right. Hold up. Okay. Now look what it says. They're gonna go to the outline of biblical usage. They're gonna look at the first definition: an apt and harmonious arrangement, constitution, order, government. That you notice how all of these say ornament, decoration, adornment, i.e., arrangement of the stars, the universe, the world, the circle of the earth, the inhabitants of the earth, men, the human family, the ungodly multitude. This is based on Thayer's Greek lexicon. Now, how do I know that for a fact? How do I know that I'm not just making that up? Here's Thayer's Greek lexicon. You see right here, I'm going to show all. What's the first definition? In Greek writing from Homer down, an apt and harmonious arrangement or constitution order. That's the word government. As in Greek from Homer down, ornament, decoration, adornment. You notice how it's giving the definitions? This is based on Thayer's Greek lexicon. Okay? Now watch this. What's the definition of John 3:16 according to this? Because this is based on this. So this is going to indicate the same thing. What is the actual definition there? Remember John 3:16, right?
Mhm.
Let me show you it. Here it is. Do you see where it says John 3:16 here? I just highlighted it.
I got it.
It's the fifth definition. Pardon me. The inhabitants of the world, particularly the inhabitants of earth, men, the human race. And what does it give as the definition of that definition? John 3:16, for God so loved the world. That's the proper definition. So going back up here, it's this one. Number 5. That's the proper definition of John 3:16. All because they don't bother to look at the resources that they're misusing. So it's the fifth definition, this definition. You see it?
I got it.
That's the cut. That shows you that when they're, so if you ever see them go to this and you ever see them say, this is the definition, you can say, this is based on Thayer's Greek lexicon. This is the definition, number 5. And then show them where it says John 3:16. And that's the cut. You see how easy that was? All because we're looking at things in context, which they don't bother to do. They don't look at things in context.
Correct.
Now, let me show you. I'm not done there. That word world without end. I'm going to show you that that isn't talking about the world of, because that word world here, we're going to look at it. Isaiah 45:17. I'm going to pull this up in Bible Hub. Remember that the word there, and here, let me actually go back so you can see it. Here, let me do something real quick. I'm going to go in Bible Hub now.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to John 3:16. We're going to look at that word. Cosmos is the word that appears there. That's why I brought it up, right? The word world is cosmos in John 3:16. Cosmos. Cosmos. All right. John 3:16. All right. You see my screen?
I got it.
You see where it says, so cosmon, because it's in the accusative right there. So anyways, cosmon. Just so we're sure, so, you see that the root is cosmos, right?
Mhm.
Isaiah 45:17. Let's look at it in the Septuagint, because this is what they're going to do. They're going to go to the King James. But Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation. Ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end. Even if we look at it in the Hebrew, the word is just forever and ever. You shall not be confounded or disgraced to forever and ever. Ad alome ad. Right? Now, let's look at the Septuagint. This is the Greek translation of that verse made by the Israelites before the time of the apostles. Now, let me go to verse 17. Notice that cosmos is not there. So you can see what cosmos looks like in the Greek. This is the word in the Greek. Do you see this? Or cosmon? Even this form with the sigma at the end. Notice cosmos, cosmon. It's not there. This is kyrios. This is the word for, or kyrion, pardon me. So this, look what it says right here. Do you see that the word there is not in any shape, form, or fashion cosmos or cosmon? Now we can actually click on the words and we can see how they're properly defined, okay? This is how the ancient Israelites, the actual Israelites, understood this passage, okay? Do you see the word here? When we click on this word, do you see where it says aeon?
Oh, let me see.
All right. Ever, like evermore, like world there means like world, like without ceasing, forever, unbroken, age, perpetual time, eternity. Now here it says world, universe, but the way it's being used is in reference to forever. That's why other translations will render this here. Let's actually go here. I'm going to go back. This is why other translations, including the Septuagint, which I'm going to read in a moment. Let me get the parallel here. To ages everlasting, they will never again be humiliated or disgraced throughout everlasting ages. Notice this is everlasting ages. To all eternity. Notice there's no world. To ages everlasting. World without end. That's what I want you to focus in on. World without end. Where do we see that phrase being used in the New Testament? In Ephesians chapter 3, where it's not about talking about like the world of the Jews. It's literally just forever and ever. So this is the King James reading. Now look what it says right here. It says, unto him be glory in the church by Christ throughout all ages, world without end. Amen. Notice it says world without end. Oops. What is that phrase, world without end, in the Greek? Notice what it says. Of the age of the ages. Ionion ton, ionios ton ionion. Okay? Now we're going to go back. When it talks about world without end, it's not talking about cosmos. It's talking about an everlasting salvation. Okay? Let me see if I could, believe this is it right here. Oops, no, not this one. Hold up. I'm trying to find the other one. This is the one of being ashamed. No, where's that? Where did I just have it? Pardon me. Yeah, where it says ton. And this right here that we were just looking at earlier. The word aeon, right? Aeon. Which is used forever, unbroken age, perpetuity of time, eternity, right? You see how that works? These guys, because they're misreading what they're looking at, they're not bothering to look at the Greek of the Septuagint to see how the Israelites actually understood that verse. They're basically just showing their ignorance of that passage, all right? Now, let me actually see if I could, let me do it this way because it's going to take me a second. Let me actually do this real quick. Because I think it might have it here. If it doesn't have it here, then I think I have it in this other resource. But this is going to explain the usage of Isaiah 45:17 in the Septuagint. In fact, here, let me I'll do it easier. Here, it'll be easier if I just pull the English translation, because the English translation is going to reflect how that Greek word is understood. All right. So this is Brenton's Septuagint. Look what it says. Isaiah 45:17 in the Septuagint, the English translation. All right. Sharing my screen now. You'll be able to see it. Oops. You see my screen?
I got it.
Israel is saved by the Lord with an everlasting salvation. They shall not be ashamed nor confounded forevermore. Man, that sure sounds a lot like, and this is a translation that predates the King James. That sure sounds like a lot like what the NIV says, to ages everlasting, or the English Standard, to all eternity, and all these others, because that's literally what the Hebrew phrase encapsulates and what the Greek translation of the Hebrew phrase encapsulates. It's even what the English of the King James encapsulates. World without end. How did the King James render this? Look at the end of of Ephesians 3. World without end. Was that talking about cosmos? No, that's talking about ages unto the ages. Look at the Greek. What was the phrase that was used there? Ionos, ton, ionion. Which is, ironically enough, when we go back, let me see if I could pull it up again. Let me see if I could go back. Which is, ironically enough, the phrase that's used, in the Septuagint. Right here. Look at the phrase. Look at the phrase. You see it? You see it? How did the King James render it? World without end. This wasn't talking about cosmos. This is talking about ages unto the ages. That's what Isaiah 45:17 is talking about. Israel would have an everlasting salvation, ages unto the ages, for forevermore, basically. Well, did these guys ever bother to look at Isaiah 49 verse 6? Same book of Isaiah, since we like to read things in context here, and this is how you get them bad. Isaiah 49 and verse 6. Look what it says. Isaiah 49 verse 6. Let's read it together. He says, "It is too light a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you as a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth." And where do we see a parallel of that in the New Testament? Well, in two places. Starting with Christ in Luke chapter 2. And I'll do this off the top of the head to show that I'm not even reading anything. Luke 2:29 through 32. "Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace according to thy word. For my eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people. A light to lighten the Gentiles," the non-Israelites, "and the glory of thy people Israel." How do we know that for a fact? How do we know it's the non-Israelites? How did this verse begin in Isaiah 49? "It is a light thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob." Who are the tribes of Jacob? All 12 tribes. "And to bring back the preserved of Israel." Right? If you look at this in the Septuagint, it's the scattered of Israel, the diaspora of Israel. That's how it's rendered in the Septuagint. "I will make you as a light for the nations," the non-Israelites, meaning them as well, "that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." Well, let's go back to Luke. Let's go to Luke 2. Luke chapter 2, 29. Oh, this thing's not going to let me do it here. I guess I got to do it this way. Yeah, 29 through 32. Because they're going to go to Luke 1, 68 through 77. Misread that and not even bother to read chapter 2. Here, let's actually look at it. Let's look at it in context. Look, I even show you that verbatim I was quoting the King James off the top of the head. "Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace according to thy word, for my eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, and the glory of thy people Israel." Israel's all 12 tribes here. Gentiles are the other nations, just like we saw in Isaiah 49 verse 6. Where do we see that being quoted? We see that being quoted, Isaiah 49 and 6, in the New Testament verbatim in the book of Acts chapter 13. and it's in reference to the non-Israelites that Paul and the believers there were talking to when we look at it. And look what it says. After the people had rejected Christ, look what it says. The next Sabbath, almost the whole city gathered to hear the word of the Lord. But when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy. By the way, this term Jew, I want you to look at this term Jew real quick. Because they're going to make an argument. See, that's the southern kingdom, brother. The Gentiles are the northern kingdom. I'm going to show you how we cut them. Notice it says the Jews, right? What did that term encompass by the time of the Apostle Paul? Look what it says. Before the exile, the term Jew, right? Judaios. Now look what it says. This is how you beat them up. Before the exile, citizens of the kingdom of Judah. After the exile, all the Israelites. All the Israelites. Did it say all the people of the southern kingdom or all the Israelites? All the Israelites. So when we saw that term there, it's not just talking about the southern kingdom of Judah. And how do we know that for a fact here? I'll show you how we know that for a fact. Real quick, before I continue reading this. Who came back with the people of Judah, Levi, and Benjamin from the exile?
I think
I'll
Asher.
show you. It says, so all Israel was recorded in genealogies, and these are written in the book of the kings of Israel. And Judah was taken into exile in Babylon because of their breach of faith. Now the first to dwell again in their possession in their cities were Israel, the priests, the Levites, the temple servants, and some of the people of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. This is northern kingdom. Lived in Jerusalem. It's a cut. So it shows that you had the residue of the northern kingdom that came back. So let's go back. Notice how we're beating them up because I'm already anticipating their responses before they even give them. Because I know how these guys think. So it says the Jews. This includes those people from Ephraim and Manasseh and Asher, because Anna was from the tribe of Asher, Luke 2:36, and all the other people that came back, the residue, because there was only a remnant that came back. Just like Isaiah said, only a remnant would return. But when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and began to contradict what was spoken by Paul, reviling him, meaning insulting him. And Paul and Barnabas spoke out boldly, saying it was necessary that the word of God be spoken first to you, since you thrust it aside and judge yourselves unworthy of eternal life. Behold, we are turning to the Gentiles. So he's telling the Israelites, we're turning to the non-Israelites. For so the Lord has commanded us, saying, I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. Now, why are they saying it that way if this is in reference to Christ? What did Christ tell the apostles, which later included, since Paul wasn't one of the original, he came about after the fact? What did Christ tell his apostles? Whoever hears you, hears me who sent you. If Christ is going to be the light to the Gentiles and the glory of the people of Israel, then his apostles are also going to be a light to the Gentiles and the glory of the people of Israel, right? Remember, we're reading Acts. What did Christ himself tell our brother Paul? Here, let me actually do it this way. What did our brother Paul, what was he told by Ananias? Verse 15. Ananias says, but here he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call on your name. But the Lord said to him, go. For he is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. So we know that the Gentiles he's talking to there are not Israelites in the Gentile state of mind. They're literal Gentiles. How do we know that for a fact? How do we know that I'm not just making that up? When Paul is talking to the diaspora, he refers to them as men of Israel. When he talks to non-Israelites, he calls them what they are, Gentiles. He calls them, for example, in Acts 17, men of Athens. Paul is talking to non-Israelites when he says the Gentiles. He's talking about them when he references the Gentiles there.
I got a question.
Lo, behold, we are turning to the Gentiles. I'll answer it in a second. For so the Lord has commanded us, saying, I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. When the Gentiles heard this, they began rejoicing and glorifying the word of the Lord. And as many as were appointed to eternal life believed. There's no getting around that. Yeah, go ahead, brother. What was your question?
Yes, sir. When it's about the temple servants, right?
Mm-hmm.
The I think you call them the Nethinim. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I think back in what it is, Joshua, the Gibeonites. I think you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to fool them and stuff like that. So are the temple servants are would they be classified as a part of the Israelites, or are they still
They're a
like
part of the nation, of course. Yeah,
so
of course.
so they are even though by birthright they aren't correct?
No, because the idea of being a part of the nation isn't by birthright. You become a part of
Gotcha,
the nation by being a part of the nation. Let's go to the book of Joshua, chapter 8.
gotcha,
And
gotcha.
you'll notice that the stranger, look what it says, verses 33 through 35. Now, look what it says, even in regard to the stranger. And all Israel, sojourner as well as native born. So, who's the all Israel in reference to, according to this?
Shoot, you the native born, I
Look at the
guess.
screen.
Mhm.
Look, no, it's not in reference to the native born. No, brother. Read again.
Okay.
And all Israel, the first word is sojourner
John.
as well as native born. So who's the all Israel in reference to?
As everybody, if you're in the camp,
Who are the two categories there?
a native born and a sojourner.
Yeah, the stranger, right?
Hmm.
With their elders and officers and their judges stood on opposite sides of the ark before the Levitical priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Half of them in front of Mount Gerizim and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded at the first to bless the people of Israel, which includes these two categories because Israel wasn't just made up of the physical descendants. How do I know that for a fact? Deuteronomy 29. Deuteronomy 29. Let's go down to verse 14. Verse 11. No, I'll start at verse 10. You are standing today, all of you, before the Lord your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders and your officers, all the men of Israel. So this is talking about physical descendants here. So this is all the men who descend from Jacob with their elders and officers. All these people descend from Jacob. Your little ones. These are the male and female children. Your wives. These are the women. And the sojourner who is in your camp, from the one who chops your wood to the one who draws your water. Now he's still talking to the physical descendants here, so that you may enter into the sworn covenant that the Lord your God, with the Lord your God, which the Lord your God is making with you today. So he's saying this to the tribes, the elders, the officers, the men of Israel, the little ones and the wise, right? That's who he's talking to. That he may establish you today as his people, and that he may be your God as he promised you, and as he swore to your fathers, to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. It is not with you alone that I am making this sworn covenant, not only with you, but with whoever is standing here with us today before the Lord our God. Oops, the Lord, our God, right? Who would that be in reference to here? I'm going to highlight it for you. I'm going to give you the cheat. I'm going to give you the cheat code.
Baby.
Who is that? It is neither with you alone in reference to.
Sojourner.
That's right. So they also entered into the covenant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we go back to Joshua. So when they're reading the law, because remember, the covenant is keeping the commandments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the old covenant.
Correct.
And all Israel, sojourner as well as native born, with the elders and officers and their judges, stood on opposite sides of the ark and before the Levitical priests, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Half of them in front of Mount Gerizim and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of God, had commanded at the first to bless the people of Israel. And afterwards he read all the words of the law, the blessing and the curse, according to all that is written in the book of the law. That there was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, and the women, and the little ones, and the sojourner who lived among them. It's a cut. There's no getting around that. They're included in the all Israel because Israel is a nation that you can be naturalized into just like any nation in antiquity. Right? That's why when you get to books like Esther 8:17, why do you have people becoming Jews? Here, let's read that. Esther chapter 8, verse 17. Look what it says on the screen. And it reads, and in every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many of the people of the country declared themselves Jews, for the fear of the Jews had fallen on them. How does the King James render that? It says declared themselves, but it's really became because it's a verb. It wasn't that they were declaring it, they became. And many of the people of the land became Jews. How do I know it's became Jews? Because the verb is being used there in the Hebrew. Here, let's actually, here goes the Hebrew text. Became Jews. Notice that it's a verb in the hiphostem. You see it?
I got.
Notice it says verb, become Jews. Diminutive of the form corresponding to, here it says from Yehud, Judah. You see that?
I see it.
Diminutive verb from Yehuda, Judah, became Jews. Here, let me show you something. This is Acts, the book of Acts. 24:24.
I'm fixing one now.
Hey, brother, you got to mute, man. I hear your background, brother.
Sorry.
So here goes Acts 24:24. Who became a Jew? Let's see. Let's talk about becoming Jews. Acts 24:24. And after certain days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, which was a Jewess, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Gee, so Paul's talking to Felix, who's a non-Israelite, and he's talking to his wife. Now, it says she's a Jewess. Does that mean she's from the tribe of Judah? No, let's see who she is. Here goes the Greek text. For some reason, I can't see the... Let's look at the Greek text. Drusilla, right? You see the screen? Drusilla. Feminine diminutive of Drusus, a Roman name. Drusilla, a member of the Herodian family. This is an Edomite. And she's being called Jewess, female Jew. All right? That term Jew, so you can see the feminine construction. Judaiah, a Jewess. Jew, Jewish. Jews, Judea. Judean belonging to Yehuda. Jewess of Judea. From Yoda, the sense of Yodas, as a country, Judean, belonging to Yehuda. And that same, like, this is what's interesting, right? This shows me, when our Hebrew Israelite friends are making this argument, they're showing us that they don't know what they're talking about. Without noun, substantially Jewish as respects to birth, race, religion, a Jew. Notice it says race, religion, right? Remember, this is the one that we read earlier, after the exile, all the Israelites. But it's also used for converts. Is used of converts from Judaism, Jewish Christians, right? I just wanted y'all to see how this is definitionally used. All right? And for Drusilla, it's used, it says it has a scope of range. More often as a substantious Jews, context clusters around three broader domains. Geographic land of Judah, Judea, the ethno-religious people descended from the patriarchs, cultural practices that mark that people, and also for converts, because we have literally this woman who's literally of the Herodian dynasty is literally Edomites, the Edomites. Daughter of Agrippa, the elder wife of Felix, the governor of Judea. You see that? Placing her in the notorious Herodian dynasty. All right? It's crazy, man. These guys, all because they're not reading in context. They're not looking at anything in context. That's insane to me. But you see how we broke that down? So when you see Jews hearing the word of God, Drusilla was an Edomite. Why is she hearing the gospel? Why is King Agrippa hearing the gospel in Acts chapter 26? Why is Paul saying, I would hope that you and all who hear me this day would be both and altogether such as I am, except for these bonds, these chains? When Agrippa said, thou almost persuade me to become a Christian. Why is Paul even telling him about the gospel? Well, let's go there. This is how you beat up this bad doctrine, man. This doctrine ain't got no legs to stand on, man. I wish we had a Hebrew Israelite in here who would try to defend their beliefs, man. Come on. Y'all can't let me down like this, man. Y'all Hebrew Israelites be afraid to come up into live streams, but then be declaring that Christians don't want to talk to you and be afraid. But y'all be the ones that are afraid. Look at this real quick, brother. Brother Jason, this is the last one. Lest they try to say that those Jews or the Gentiles are all the same, that those are all Israelites, the northern kingdom. Nah, man. Look at this right here. Now look what Paul says. He's saying, Jesus, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. Therefore, O King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but declared first to those in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, and throughout all the region of Judea, and also to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God, performing deeds in keeping with their repentance. For this reason, the Jews seized me in the temple and tried to kill me. To this day, I've had the help that comes from God, and I stand here testifying both to small and great, saying nothing but what the prophets and Moses said would come to pass, that the Christ must suffer, and that by being the first to rise from the dead, he would proclaim light both to our people and to the Gentiles. Notice he excludes the Gentiles from our people. So he's not talking about the people of Israel when he says Gentiles here. He's talking about the people that were outside of Israel, that even they now have access to salvation. How do I know that when he says our people? Because he mentions earlier our 12 tribes, to which our 12 tribes hope to attain as they earnestly worship night and day. And for this hope I am accused by the Jews, O king. So when he says our people, they can't make the Gentiles there also Israel. It has to be non-Israelite. He would proclaim light both to our people, the 12 tribes he mentioned earlier, and to the Gentiles. And even our people doesn't just mean the 12 tribes. Let me correct that. It would include the Gentile convert too, like Agrippa. That's why he's talking to Agrippa, because Agrippa is a part of the nation. Yeah. Now this is what's interesting. Some Hebrew Israelites will accuse Paul of lying. Paul's going to contradict them. Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you are out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you out of your mind. But Paul said, I am not out of my mind, most excellent Festus, but I am speaking true and rational words. Paul is telling you, I am not lying. So when people accuse Paul of lying, they're bearing false witness on our brother. Paul told you he wasn't lying. And not only that, he's doing this under trial. You can't bear false witness under oath. Notice that he's doing a defense before Agrippa.
How about that?
It's a cut. There's no getting around that. But our uneducated Hebrew Israelite friends show us that they don't know what they're talking about. You know? How easy is this all to understand just by reading context, looking at things in context?
It's a lot easier than, hopscotch, hopscotching against you know what I'm saying, across the Bible, you know what I'm saying, with no context, just cherry picking this verse and that verse. It's good to just go through it, the root words of everything like that, and and really getting an understanding of what the writer meant when he wrote it, and not trying to put our stuff in it. So that's real good.
Now, I've been going for 2 hours and 21 minutes, and we have Nan, a Hebrew Israelite, that has come up in here.
Nah, ain't gonna happen.
I'm going to do this one more time. I'm dropping the link. Hebrew Israelites, you can come up in here. You can come get this work. I got job applications. Y'all can get one. I'm trying to help y'all get right, man. You know what I mean? Yeah, man. Listen, I'm like Job Corps out here, man. I'm giving applications out, man. Come up in here, man. Get you an application. Hey, brother Jason, man, but I want you to see how easy it is to defend against their beliefs, man. This doctrine doesn't have
Yeah.
any legs to stand on.
No, it don't. It don't. It's just when they come, you know what I'm saying, with the with the with script after script, and then they just bombard you with it. And but it's good, because it's sometimes it ain't meant for you to respond initially. Sometimes it's just good to say, all right, let me see what you said. Let me go back and read. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then see if their words have legs to stand on. And if it don't, it don't. I mean, that's all to it.
Hey, brother Willie, man, let me ask you a question, right? Because you were in ICGJC. If I would have hit you with all that information back then, what would have been the strategy, the tactic that you would have used back then? Everything I just hit you with. Like, what would have been your immediate tactic?
Um, back then, um, wow. Um, I probably, I mean, hearing all of that, the way that you broke that down would have been a bit, overwhelming because I would have never even heard anything like that before, and I probably would have just exited the conversation. I really wouldn't can't think of a tactic that I would have used to counter that.
Now, when people are out on the street, it's much easier to try to counter somebody hit because you got a loud speaker if people have like a speaker, or if you got a group of brothers, a lot of y'all can just start chanting over and over and over to try to drown the person out, right,
Yeah,
brother Willie?
yeah.
Yeah. So here's my question: Why do that? Why would a person do that if they have the so-called truth? Why would
It's
they
because
have to engage in that tactic?
they don't. They're doing that just reeks of desperation. That's all that is.
Yep. And brother Jason, when they was doing that to you, man, when they was trying to get you, I don't know if you was talking to a camp or you was talking to some brothers individually, but when they do that to you, um, that's a tactic to try to get around from the obvious, right? Then again, like you said, at the time you weren't as studious as you are now. Um, but I wanted to give you that just so you have something to prepare you because these guys, their tactics go deep, man. It ain't gonna just stop at the surface scratching, the surface level, man. That's why I'm trying to give you something a little deeper. So when they hit you with that, you have something to counter them with.
Oh no,
So when you get a chance,
oh no, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Oh no, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I've been uh um picking up on certain things, that you said in the past, you know what I'm saying, on your past streams, and like, one of the real good ones I got was, some years back when you and brother Jay, you know what I'm saying, were kind of like, you know breaking everything down and stuff like that, man. And it's been real good, as far as me studying, what I'm saying, getting those points and things of that nature. So, for sure, it's been good.
Absolutely, man. And I want to give you something that is substantial, something that, man, when they try to hit you, like you already got a defense. You already anticipating they moves.
Oh, for
You
sure.
know, that's why I do these live streams. I want brothers and sisters to have a defense. It's not just to pull them out, it's also to give y'all a defense, to give
Mm.
y'all a defense against this lie because it's a lie, it's a deception. You notice how I'm bringing out resource after resource, piece after piece of evidence, everything that's going to contradict their doctrine because
Hmm.
none of their doctrine is based on the actual evidence. It's based on their feelings and emotions based around this doctrine. A lot of these guys join these groups, they basically whatever the leader tells them. Matter of fact, brother Willie, since I got you here, in ICGJC, y'all were taught to blindly follow what Tazadakia told y'all, right? Like they wouldn't say blindly follow, but that's really what it was, right?
Yeah, yeah. We basically had to stick with whatever Tazadaki brought out and not deviate from what he brought out because it's because of that doctrine of they taught us that he brought out that ever since he brought out that he's the God sent comforter, that pretty much sealed the deal on whatever he breaks the scripture down is
You,
the way it's.
you were breaking up a little bit, brother. You got to start from the top again. Try to start from the top again. From the top, my good brother. If you could start from the top, because you were breaking up. I don't know if that was me or
That belief
was
that
that
he's
him
the
or was
God
that
sent
me?
comforter. We had to,
No, see.
huh?
That was it. Hey, brother Willie, you have been breaking up. So try
Oh,
to start from the top again. From the top again.
okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you good now,
You
brother.
good.
Okay. All right. So basically, because of that doctrine about him being the comforter, you know, we had to stick with whatever he taught, the way that he taught it. We couldn't deviate from nothing that he taught, because we were all mystified into believing that, you know, that this man was the Holy Spirit in the flesh. So whatever breakdowns came out through him was coming directly from the throne of God. But we had to believe what he taught exactly the way he taught, and we couldn't question it or deviate from it.
And that's how a lot of the camps operate, man. Their leader basically gives the breakdown, and the members basically parrot what the head leader says. Like now, some groups will tell you, "Oh, when we tell our members to question us, and we don't just tell them to." But let's be honest, most groups out there, what they teach is what they teach. If you don't like it, then you got to get out, right? Basically, ICGJC taught if you don't agree with their doctrines, you got to get out. Keep it pushing, basically. You know what I mean, right, Willie? Brother Willie,
He- Hello?
yeah, could
Can
you
you
hear
hear
me?
me?
I said ICGJC taught that whatever they teach, you if you're with them, you need to go with the doctrine. If you try to come with something else, they'll kick you out. They'll excommunicate you. You'll be out of the group. And of course, in their doctrine, leaving the group is akin to like you blaspheming the spirit. You basically left the truth. You're going to hell, basically. Like ain't no hope for you. You basically so you're always under the constant threat of having to stay there, even if you disagree with the doctrine, because you're afraid that you're gonna go to hell, that you're gonna end up in hell if you disagree with the doctrine, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
That's a horrible way to live, and that shows you. So, brother Jason, so you understand what this brother came out of. He came out of possibly one of the most extreme camps. Like his group is the original One West. So
Okay.
you see all these other camps that you see out here, like IUIC and all of them. So they all are derivatives of his group.
Okay.
So IUIC is a splinter of 12 Tribes, which is a splinter of House of David Church, which was a split that took place between Masha and Arya in the original One West.
Mm.
So that's a splinter of a splinter of a splinter of a splinter. Sakari is a splinter of GMS. GMS, that's Great Millstone. GMS is a splinter of House of David Church. House of David Church is a splinter of the original school. Most of these groups that you see now, they either came out of the House of David split or they came directly out of the original One West. So like Gathering of Christ Church, that group, their leader was a member of Light and Body Church. They had a split, and Light and Body Church formed after the members basically left the original One West school, Willie's school, the school that he was a part of. They left that school. They started their own group called Light and Body Church. Then they had a split, and then that's what formed Gathering of Christ Church. So you notice like splinters of splinters of splinters. Most of these groups are like that. Now some groups like Future no, pardon me, Watchmen for Israel, they formed because the dude was influenced by the videos online from somebody who either was in one of these camps or came out of the original school. So all of it goes back to the original One West in some shape, form, or fashion, either through the influence of the doctrine or through directly being taught in that school. So his school's the original.
I
He
see.
comes from the original One West. If there's anything you want to ask this brother, man, feel free. This brother's a brother in Christ these days, man. He came out of that deception. He's got great information, man. He was really in it. He was in it for like 20 plus years. So
20 years. Wow. That's a long time, Brother Willie. That's a real long time, man. Yeah, so just real quick, besides well, not besides, but like the main thing, because of God, what else prompted you to leave? The organization.
Yeah, basically, it was a lot of verbal abuse that I took.
Wow.
Um, yeah, in like the last year that I was there, leading up to me leaving, a lot of verbal abuse and shaming from so-called chief priests and apostles in the organization that led to me deconstructing that doctrine and deliberately going against their order to not watch videos from ex-members online and studying, reading the Bible on my own, and no longer watching Tazadakis DVDs or paying for the Comforter Stream, which was a streaming service that they set up after he died, $39.99 a month to stream all of his DVDs on a website and unreleased classes. They set that up months after he died in September of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. That's when it launched. And I canceled that, and then I started reading the Bible on my own. I started studying Hebrew and Greek on my own, and reading the writings of the early church fathers and deconstructing their doctrines for months. Um, and it got to the point where I just decided that enough was enough. I didn't believe these guys' doctrine anymore. I knew it was heretical, and I didn't see anything getting any better as far as having to put up with these people's verbal abuse. And I knew I was going to continue to deal with it, and I didn't want to continue dealing with it. So it got to the point where I stopped getting on that Sabbath conference calls because they have not done in-person Sabbath worship since COVID. They've been doing conference calls from 2020 all the way up until now, even despite the fact that um, COVID restrictions have been loosed ever since 2023, but they're still doing conference calls for the Sabbath. And I stopped getting on those Sabbath conference calls, and their mandated weekly men's conference calls that they have people in the ranks get on, because I was in the ranks at the time that I left. I was an officer of 100. I stopped getting on that. And when they tried getting in contact with me to find out why I wasn't getting on their calls anymore, I sent one of their so-called 13 shield generals a text letting them know, if this is somebody from my CGJC, don't contact me no more. Your doctrine is heresy. I don't believe it anymore.
Mm.
Please don't contact me anymore after this. And I haven't been contacted by them since I'm done with them.
All praises, man. All praises. You know, hey, glory be to God, man. Hey, get you up out of that, and and get into the real truth, man. For sure.
Amen.
Sure. Amen. Amen. Sure,
Well,
bro.
look here, brothers, man. I really appreciate y'all for coming on through, brother Jason, man. I really appreciate you for the questions that you asked, and brother Willie, I appreciate you. And me and Willie gonna keep doing these, man. I'm
Oh,
gonna
cool,
get
man.
some more brothers. There's another brother that I wanted to jump in today, man. I'm gonna see if I get him in on the next one. I'm gonna do some more interviews with former Hebrew Israelites, man, so y'all get to see how God is good, man. He's pulling these people out of this foolishness. This is a lie, it's a deception, and I want people to see that it's a lie and a deception. But man, I really appreciate y'all brothers for the support. I appreciate the sister for always showing love, the brother Joe, the rest of y'all, all y'all brothers and sisters that come through. I wish we would get some of these Hebrew Israelites in this live stream, man. Like, don't it feel crazy, man? They talk all that good stuff
They talk
and don't
big.
be jump.
They talk big, big.
Yeah, they talk. Yeah, they talk big and bad, and don't be nowhere, bruh. How many of these live streams I've done now, and y'all
Yup.
brothers, I
You
may have
right.
gotten like
You right.
three of them to come in this live stream. Three of them, bro,
Because they
and I
know.
got 7 with this one.
Because they know. They know.
Well,
Yeah.
it's gonna keep happening. I ain't gonna stop, man.
That's
I
how
ain't gonna stop. I'm gonna keep doing it too. I want to see who gonna be big and bad, because they talk all that big and bad stuff, man. They don't be nowhere to be found, man. Y'all don't be nowhere. I be everywhere. Y'all don't be nowhere. Nah, you know what I'm saying? No, let me stop. Nah, but for real, man, like that to me is so disheartening. Y'all talk all big and bold about how Christians won't come and see you, and yeah, they don't be wanting to deal with y'all doctrines, and y'all don't be nowhere to be found, man, nowhere.
Hmm. There you go. There you go.
Well,
What?
well, 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 and what's crazy is me and this brother, we in a group on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Willie, we in this group, right? And they'll drop 100 comments on all the other videos that don't be live. But every time I do a live video, it be quiet as a church mouse from them, right? You don't see no comments from them, man. They don't be nowhere to be found. It's crazy to me, man. I dropped the link in the chat of the not the chat. Yeah, I dropped it in the chat of this live stream. I dropped it in the comment of the video on my channel in the community post. I dropped it in the join link in the various Facebook groups that I went to. Not one of these guys jumped in, man. And today's the Shabbat. This is the day they're so-called resting. They're not doing anything.
The wicked
Supposedly.
flee.
Yeah, the wicked flee when none pursue it. The wicked don't show up. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't show up.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
No doubt.
Yeah, man. But you know what, man? We'll keep them in prayer, Lord willing, because at the end of the
Amen.
day,
Amen.
we were all wicked and we came into the light, and we want them to come into the light. That's the end goal. The end goal isn't that we're doing this to disparage them. The end goal is that we want to see souls be saved, right, Brother Jason? That's what we want at the end of the day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, man.
Yeah, man.
right.
But I appreciate y'all, brothers. Brother Willie, I appreciate you, brother. You know, stick around, Brother Willie. I wanted to talk to you. But with that being said, y'all, we're gonna end it here. I really appreciate the brothers and sisters that showed up to show support. Like I said, the streaming schedule is gonna go like this. Just for those who don't know, it's going to go Tuesday. Actually, now hold on, y'all got me tripping. See, y'all got me second guessing myself. I got to make sure I know my exact streaming schedule. So I know Saturday is one of the days. I know that for a fact. So the streaming schedule moving forward is going to go like this, just so you guys know. The schedule will be Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you can expect a live stream of some type, whether it be an interview, whether it be me debating one of these guys, if I could ever get one of them in one of these things, or it be a teaching video. Because moving forward, it'll be like a video going over specific verses and things like that and giving clarity. So hopefully y'all brothers and sisters keep coming through, keep showing support. Brother Willie, stick around, man. And with that being said, we're going to end it here. God bless you all. I hope this has edified someone out there. And until next time, take care. God bless you.